And now we'll get started with our program. It's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Murat Sonmez, who is the Managing Director and Head of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution at the World Economic Forum. This was another point that was mentioned yesterday, the whole new area of artificial intelligence, data analytics, blockchain, Internet of Things, smart technology, and how that's already infiltrating into the industry. And again, another development that perhaps companies cannot continue to ignore if they are doing so. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Murat now to enlighten us a bit more on that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Sabah al-khair. Okay. I would like to start with a reverse Slido. Raise your hand if you have kids, please. Thank you. Raise your hand if you have international operations. And raise your hands if you have heard about a European regulation called GDPR. Okay, thank you. And final question, raise your hand if you know what this is. Excellent. I'll talk about, first of all, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting us. I'll start my conversation about the Fourth Industrial Revolution by taking us back 3,000 years. What we see on stage here is a Chinese game called Go. It's a black and white checker game, and people say it's 2,000 to 3,000 years old. What's interesting about this game is the number of moves on that 19 by 19 board. I know we're in the Chemical Society meeting, you're used to molecules, and this number is 2.08 times 10 to the power 172. And it's the number of possible games that's possible on this 2,000 or 3,000-year-old game. How big is this number? If you look at the atoms in the known universe, that's 10 billion galaxies. In each galaxy, there are 100 billion stars. And our solar system is one of that 100 billion in the 10 billion. The total number of atoms in the known universe is 10 to the power 68. Just a small portion of the number of moves on that board game. For a long time, computer scientists thought that we were decades away from mastering Go. I took my first artificial intelligence course in 1987, and I tried to write a program that played Go, and it was a spectacular failure. The reason is, in artificial intelligence, it's pretty much a branching tree search algorithm. You look at the next move, and then you try to go all the way down, and then decide if I make this move or if I make this decision that has the best chance of success. When you have this many possibilities, it's almost, we don't have the computing capacity to make this many calculations. Chess was mastered in 1998 by IBM. They played Kasparov, the #1 ranked player at the time. He won the first game, IBM won the second game. And he claimed they cheated. IBM was happy with the result. They unplugged the machine, and the score was 1-1. That was 20 years ago. In March 2016, a little over 2 years ago, a computer game called Alphago, developed by these three guys, Mustafa, Demis, and Shane out of London, beat the 18-time world champion Lee Sedol, that's on the left side of our stage, 33 years old. He's a Korean national. He had been playing Go since age 3. Alphago, developed by DeepMind, the company that these three young guys developed, beat Lee, 18-time world champion, 4-1. It was a pivotal moment in humanity. Number one, technically, instead of doing this exhaustive search, what these guys did is they fed data from 200,000 games online played, 200,000 online games played, and their machine learning engine, AlphaGo, taught itself how to play Go well enough to beat the 18-time world champion 4-1. It won the first 3 games. Lee won the 4th game. He made a victory lap, and people thought he would win the 5th game, and it would be more of a tie. But he lost the 5th game. At the time, the #1 ranked player was a 19-year-old Chinese guy, and he said, "Bring it on, I'm ready." And he gave up after losing the first 2 games. March 2016, was the date when human insight surpassed machine insight surpassed human insight, provided that you have access to large sets of data. And again, it was incomplete information. It did not do exhaustive search. Just by looking at data from 200,000 games, it mastered the game. So that was the number one pivotal moment. The second one is, when this happened, I asked at the World Economic Forum, we work with 28 top research universities, and one of them is UC Berkeley. And I asked one of their leading AI professors, Stu Russell, I said, Stu, before this happened, if I had asked you how far we were away from mastering Go, what would you have said? He said 10 to 20 years. Before this happened, experts assumed we were 10 to 20 years away from mastering Go. So the lesson is you can pretty much ignore expert advice because nobody is able to predict the future. And it's happening much faster. And finally, this young guy, Lee, was a role model for every Korean parent who had young daughters and sons who told their kids, if you work hard, if you study hard, you have a shot at being Lee Sedol. Suddenly, he was replaced by a machine. So what do you do? Who do you aspire to be? And how do you inspire your kids? In fact, March 2016 is known as the Alphago Shock Day in Korea. And in a subsequent presidential elections, all four presidential candidates made the Fourth Industrial Revolution a key tenet of their strategy. And we're working with the current government. So what do you teach your kids? And what happens to our business models at the same time? A brief background on these three gentlemen. Mustafa is a second-year Oxford dropout. His father is a Syrian-born taxi driver. His mother is a nurse in London. Demis in the middle is of Greek origin. He studied PhD on neuroscience at University College London. And Shane Legg is from New Zealand. And this happened not in Silicon Valley, but in the UK, in London. And this is a testament to immigration-friendly policies. And I think, thank you. I think it can happen anywhere. And in fact, Google couldn't build this technology themselves, and they acquired the company DeepMind by paying them £500 million. And after they acquired the technology, they turned the AlphaGo engine on their transaction servers and their vast amount of data centers with a lot of servers. And just by looking at the data from these transaction servers, they reduced energy consumption by 30%. Imagine instrumenting a company or a country with smart sensors and letting machine learning engine run at it. We can reduce energy consumption, we can get rid of congestion, we can help environmental challenges, and maybe one day cure cancer if we have access to data. Sure. Now, one of the tenets of the Fourth Industrial Revolution is that the amount of innovation and information is going up dramatically. Time value of information is shrinking, and time to respond is shrinking. By the time we figure things out, a new thing has developed. Now, we frequently find ourselves operating in this gray zone, what we call the too late zone. And it's true for businesses, it's true for academia, it's true for international organizations like the World Economic Forum. It's true for particularly governments because they take time to figure things out before they issue regulation. In addition, with artificial intelligence, we're at a point where the logic or the algorithm is not developed by a human being. It is derived from the machine, from the data. And to this date, we don't know why AlphaGo made the moves it made. We know what moves it made, but we don't know why it made the moves. And that's called the black box algorithm challenge in artificial intelligence. And it's the new area of research is for us to ask the machines to tell us how the algorithm was developed. We know it's better than the human expert, but we still don't know how it was developed. It poses a number of challenges for companies. You will buy or build artificial intelligence products. The question is, if the algorithm is developed from the data and there's no human involvement in building the algorithm, who owns the intellectual property? Whose data are you using? And who owns the data? And people say data is the new oil for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I'd like to make a slight modification and say data is the oxygen for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. With access to large amounts of data, we can improve pretty much everything and accelerate the formulation of solutions, but it requires a different way to look at regulation. I was talking to one of the Middle Eastern region's head of innovation authority, and he told me that his daughter developed a blood test. She's an oncologist in Massachusetts, to detect pancreatic cancer, which is one of the deadliest forms of cancer, long before the symptoms kick in. She could prove it with her data. She needed data from nearby hospitals. She could see it, she could touch it, but she could not use it because the privacy laws did not allow her to get access to data. And these laws were in place 20 years ago to protect our privacy. GDPR, which many of you said you're familiar with, was enacted in May 2018, 6 months ago. They started working on it in 2014 to address a problem that was introduced by social networks in 2004. And it says that you can take data from European citizens outside of EU, but you have to apply EU laws when you're processing the data. Now, if you're a machine learning engine, or if you have a machine learning engine, and you feed it lots of data, and you say this part of data you have to apply EU laws, this part of data you have to apply Saudi laws, this part of data you have to apply UAE laws, this part of data you have to apply Brazil laws, this part of data you have to apply Africa laws, South African laws, you're getting in the way of the usage of machine learning because it needs uninterrupted access to all kinds of data. And we cannot balkanize data for us to take advantage of machine learning. This thing, the DeepMind or AlphaGo match, happened right in the middle of when the European Commission was deliberating GDPR. They started in 2014. This had not happened. It happened in 2016, and they didn't factor this in. The second tenet of GDPR is right to be forgotten. It makes sense. I can say, look, I don't want you to use my data, and you can, I want you to remove the data. Right now, with Internet of Things, which is widely deployed in your industry or in your customers' businesses, there are more things, Internet of Things, than people providing data. And by some estimates, in about 2 years' time, there will be 20 billion smart devices producing data. Well, you need to combine data from things and people. Just in healthcare, for example, if you want to advance healthcare solutions, we need environmental data, we need lifestyle data, we need genetic data, we need clinical trials data, and we also need environment data. And most of data will come from things. How can you have a thing to be forgotten? It's easy for us to say, you can forget about me, or I want you to forget about me, but how can you forget a thing? And if you forget a thing, you can forget about cybersecurity. And finally, blockchain was mentioned yesterday as a foundational technology. It has 3 characteristics. One is a record system, ledger system. When you put something in, you cannot delete it, and it's transparent. And that's what it's being used for the most part. And if you use blockchain, by design, you cannot forget a thing because you cannot take a record out. So if you're using if you're using blockchain for data processing, you are by definition not compliant with GDPR. It's not the fault of the regulators because they had good intentions, but they were addressing a problem from 2004 when they enacted this regulation, and it was way behind. It was in the too late zone. So what do we do? What we need to do is, instead of looking backwards to predict the future, which we cannot do anymore, we can project a future we all want and walk backwards and define the regulatory frameworks or protocols, as we call it, and do pilots to see if it works. And if it does, then we can converge on that future. And that's why we established, as the World Economic Forum, the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Starting in San Francisco, we now have additional centers in India, China, Japan, and we're looking at expanding into other countries. The other aspect of the governance protocols for the Fourth Industrial Revolution is they have to be fast. It has to be agile. So we came up with a self-imposed limit of 18 months for our projects. Here's one example. When we announced the center, President of Rwanda, President Kagame, said, I am trying to use drones to deliver medical supplies to thousands of clinics, hundreds of clinics on 1,000 hills. And they started by distributing blood to women giving during childbirth, and they were dying because they didn't have the right blood type stored in the clinics. So what they did is they started working with Zipline, a Half Moon Bay-based drone company, and they stored blood in a centralized location. During a childbirth, they would get an SMS message, put the blood type on a drone, put it on a sling, let it take off, the batteries kicks in, and the blood was delivered. In the technical trial, they saved the lives of more than 900 women. And you can extrapolate it to millions of lives. There were a couple of challenges. Number one, anyone could intercept a drone and inject it with a virus and kill the whole population. Number two, the drones were flying all over the country, and they wanted to use the data as they flew over the country for agriculture purposes, but they didn't have data policies in place. Who owns the data, what you can do with it, and who gets paid? And finally, the Civil Aviation Authority said, you cannot fly drones until I certify each drone model one at a time. And by the time you certify a drone, another 100 models were out. So our team worked with the government of Rwanda, as well as the stakeholders on the ground, and in 4 months, we helped craft and pass the first and still only national drone safety regulation by using performance benchmarks. As a result, Rwanda is now able to scale their drone deployment. And the same thing is happening in nearby Tanzania, Mali, and Kenya. And there is a potential that the African countries will take advantage of it as well. Now they can project the jobs they need, the drone technicians, they can project the technologies they need. And Carnegie Mellon opened a campus in Kigali to help train people for the jobs of the future that are not based on predictions, but in actual reality. Now, you may say Rwanda is a small country, it's not consequential. I'll take you to India. In India, because of climate change, which was mentioned yesterday, the monsoon cycles are becoming irregular, and the farmers are no longer able to predict what to plant when. If they plant too late or too early, the crops die because of drought. If they plant too late, the topsoil is washed and they lose all their crops. These are all smallhold farmers in India, and they are one season away from losing their income. In Maharashtra state alone, 40 million people live off of agriculture. Across India, it's 500 million people. And because of this, the number of suicides are dramatically increasing across India because they cannot feed their families. Our project in India involves instrumenting the fields to collect real-time soil data using Internet of Things. So instead of using monsoon cycles to predict what to plant, we can collect real-time data from the fields using sensors. Precipitation data, soil condition data, sunshine data. Put it into a container, use machine learning algorithms to tell the farmers what to plant when, and then use drones to take pictures of the area to see what the yield is going to be, and also use drones to do micro-fertilization and watering because they don't have resources. And to do that, we need a new regulatory framework, and we're just taking the framework from Rwanda and implement it in India. And if we can pull it off, we will be able to impact the lives of 40 million people across Maharashtra state and 500 million people across India. The same is happening in Japan. It's an aging society and a declining population. They peaked at 125 million. They have 4 million people with dementia, and it's going to double in the next 10 to 20 years. And it's going to cripple the Japanese economy. So what we're doing with Prime Minister Abe and his government is to collect data from different sources, put it into a container, and again, use machine learning algorithms to come up with new solutions to late-stage brain diseases. We will all get there. We will all live longer. The next generation will live 10 to 20 years longer than us. And with gene editing, we will definitely look much better and live much longer. So these are the solutions that are applicable. So what does it mean for the chemical industry? I'll bring you to another development, 3D printing. You may have experienced it or experimented with it to print spare parts when machines broke. And with 3D printing, we're not just able to produce the things that we can produce today in the factories, but we can come up with new products with new physical components and conditions that we couldn't do before. At ETH Zurich in Switzerland, they're now able to 3D print a human heart made of silicon. So they'll take your measure, and on the spot, they'll 3D print a personalized heart for you. Right now, it beats for 2 hours, so we don't recommend anyone to try it unless you want to be famous. But eventually, it will beat forever. With this technology, we can wipe away the #1 killer in the world, which is the cardiovascular diseases. The question is, who gets to live longer? Who gets to benefit from this? We're already seeing a divergence between the privileged few and the rest of the society. And there is a risk, a real risk that all of us, the privileged few, not the mega rich, will take advantage of these wearable devices, artificial intelligence, and 3D printed hearts. And the gap will be even much bigger. And it will accelerate to a point of no return. And when the rest of the society feels left behind, it's not morally right, it's not socially right, it's not economically right. So our mission at the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution is to ensure that the Fourth Industrial Revolution benefits not just a few, but the rest of the society. I was talking to the Minister of Health of India when we opened our center in India. Prime Minister Modi said, look, I have 1.3 billion people. I can put a person into San Francisco, but I need to scale this. So when we launched the center, we decided to focus on artificial intelligence and blockchain at the national level and data for agriculture at the state level. I was talking to the health minister, and he said they have one physician, one doctor for every 12,000 citizens in India at state hospitals. There's no way they can deliver medical service currently, let alone to keep up with the population growth. They cannot train enough doctors, they cannot build enough hospitals. What if we swallow a nanoparticle once a week, or we can sniff it through our bloodstream? And by the way, there's an FDA-approved nanoparticle that already exists in the market today by Produce Health. And that nanoparticle collects our vitals through a secure device. We upload our cellular data to the largest scientific knowledge base that has all the scientific knowledge on genetics, environmental data, clinical trials, etc. And with the use of machine learning algorithms, we come up with a personalized medicine compound. We download the formula to our device, walk to a certified 3D printing kiosk, and have the medicine 3D printed. The techniques exist today. And I was sharing this with the Indian health industry team, and they said they used to have a job in India called the compounder. You used to go to a person, they would look at your vitals and prepare a compound. And in the UK, as you may know, they're called chemists. We can actually produce the material on the spot. And that has profound implications for your industry. You talk about feedstock, and it requires a lot of materials to be ready. And when we produce a product using 3D printing, the question is, who owns the intellectual property? How do you make sure that the owner gets paid? And here again, blockchain can provide a useful mechanism to do that. What happens if something goes wrong? Who's liable? And finally, what happens to trade rules and regulations when you're actually importing a product without it physically crossing the border? And if you're a material supplier to the 3D printers, how do you tariff your products? Is it raw material or is it finished goods? And it requires a new set of trade rules, which is one of the projects that we're working on, is digital trade and cross-border data flows. You may think that we're far away from this. You may think that this is science fiction. The phone I have in my pocket, which is an older version of iPhone 10 by now, has 4.3 billion transistors in it. The first commercial computer in 1959, a mainframe from IBM, had 55,000 transistors. This has 4.3 billion. So this is 86,000 times more powerful than the first computer, commercial computer, and it is at 0.01% of the price. We will get there with 3D printing and other technologies. If we can do that, we can ensure that anyone who can come up with any ideas, your kids, anywhere in the world, can put their design on a B2B marketplace. Anyone around the world can download that and have it 3D printed at the moment and point of consumption. This will have profound implications. First of all, it will be an equalizer for everybody, not just for the people living in big cities. So anyone can participate in this new interconnected world. But it requires deliberate policies to be developed, and it requires close cooperation between the business community, governments, academia, civil society. And finally, I would like to spend a few minutes before I wrap up on the ethics of these algorithms. How do we know that these algorithms are ethical? You may have heard about the news that in China, they're using CRISPR to come up with designer babies. So what if the algorithm tells a car to drive into the crowd? What if the algorithm tells a bus to go off the cliff? What if the algorithm tells a train to speed up and crash? What if the algorithm tells a transformer to blow up and cut off electricity? What if the algorithm tells an embedded heart to stop functioning and kill its host? At the moment, we cannot control the algorithms because they're machine developed. One of the initiatives we have at the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution is to develop an ethics switch where the governments can define their own ethics rules because there will be differences of opinion what's ethical. And we're working with the industry to embed this ethics switch in their smart devices so that when you start using it the first time, we download the ethics rules defined by the governments. And as they change the rules, we can download them, much like we upgrade our software, so that the thing, when it's asked to do something unethical in the jurisdiction that it's operating, will say, no, I'm not going to do it. Again, here, blockchain can represent an interesting opportunity to define these ethics rules. And when and if the global community reaches a common understanding and agreement on what these ethics rules are, then we can push it down. Unless we do this, there will be a potential that the gap between the privileged few and the rest of the society will be even bigger. And again, as I said, it's not good economically, it's not good socially, it's not good morally. As I wrap up my introduction, we invite all of you to join us in our efforts at the World Economic Forum to ensure that the Fourth Industrial Revolution benefits not just a few, but the rest of the society. Thank you.